Okay. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific agenda item. To comment during the meeting, members of the public may call 702-589-9629 when the public comment period is opened. Okay, so it is now open. Okay, hearing no public comment at this time, then we will begin the meeting. For possible action, approval of the minutes of the January 27th, 2021 regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as printed.
Second. Okay, and no corrections or additions, then the minutes will be placed on file. Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you. We need a vote on the minutes. So let's see. All in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? The motion is carried. Okay. Okay, agenda item 2. Presentation by the Bureau of Reclamation about proposed installation of updated lawn irrigation system, including landscape and accessibility changes at 1200 Park Street.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Some of the members have already seen prior presentations by the BOR regarding this, and other members are new. But they're here, they'll be giving you a status update, so I'll give Chad Valinga a call now.
Okay.
They're here, they'll be giving you a status update, so I'll give.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Chad, if you could mute your computer so we don't have the background.
Okay.
Great.
It's muted.
And if Holly, you would put the PowerPoint up? Mhm. Okay, can you see the screen online okay?
Not yet.
Okay, well, we're going through your PowerPoint, so right now we're on the opening slide, so you can just, whenever you're ready, just, tell us to change the, say, next slide, and we'll advance it on our end.
Okay, very good. Now I see it. Okay, well, good evening.
My name is Chad Valinga. I am a supervisory civil engineer with the Bureau of Reclamation in Boulder City. The purpose of my presentation today is to update you on the status of Reclamation's project to install a new irrigation system and refresh the landscaping and possibly improve public access to Reclamation's administration building located at 1200 Park Street. Next slide. I have three objectives for tonight's presentation. First, I'd like to show you what Reclamation intends to do. For the scope of our project, this will include showing you the trees that will be removed and where new trees will be planted, and talking briefly about the new irrigation system and show you where we'll need to cut Park Street in order to connect into the city's raw water system, and talking a lot about the existing accessibility issues at the site. I'll be sharing some of the interdisciplinary design team's thinking on this matter and would welcome your thoughts and perspectives on the accessibility issues that we're looking at. The second objective, after talking about the scope of the project, is to share with you our schedule and when you could expect construction work to begin. And finally, answer questions and get your feedback. So with that, we'll get started. Next slide.
And Chad, you can just go ahead. You've got a 30-second delay on your end, so when you say next slide, we're moving it ahead.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I was wondering about that. So here is a rendering of what we expect the finished project to look like. If you were standing on the Park Street sidewalk at the bottom of the stairs looking north up at the administration building. You'll note that the existing concrete stairs and railing will remain as they are. There will be two new accessible interpretive panels installed at the bottom of the stairs adjacent to the Park Street sidewalk. And please note that the panels that are shown in the rendering are not accessible. Someone in a wheelchair would have difficulty getting close enough to read them. But then the grass on the hill, that will be removed, and the grading will be cleaned up, and a new irrigation system will be installed, and then grass sod that matches that in the park across the street will be placed. The trees currently blocking the view of the building's main entry will be removed, and new pistache trees will be planted that better frame the building and its main entrance. Next slide. This image shows the trees that will remain, the trees that will be removed, and where the new trees will be planted. The trees that will remain include the large mulberry trees next to the Denver Street service entrance and all the trees in the desert landscape area between Park Street and the administration building's parking lot. The trees that will be removed, or in this figure, the circles with an X, include the Palo Verde trees near the main entrance, the live oak trees around the building because of the damage their invasive and aggressive roots are doing to the building's foundation, the ash tree next to Nevada Way. We had an arborist who's confirmed that the core of that tree is rotten. And then the two juniper trees and the mock orange tree next to Park Street. Next slide. Here you can see where the new trees will be planted. Like we've mentioned earlier, the pistache trees will be planted near the main entrance. Shade-producing Chinese elm trees will be planted along Nevada Way, between the existing mulberry trees along Denver Street, along that service entrance there. And laurel trees will be planted next to the building. This project also on the street, I want to point out that We will reset the Reclamation sign at the corner of Nevada Way and Park Street and plant some flowering plants such as gold lantana, red yucca, and some indigo bush. Next slide, please. So here is a plant palette showing the diversity and color of the selected plants. The 3 trees at the top, from left to right, are examples of pistache, the laurel tree, and Chinese elm tree. All the selected plants being used have proven to do well in this environment. These plants will also help attract and support birds, butterflies, and bees. Next slide, please. Here is a plan of the new irrigation system. The irrigation system has been professionally designed to be water efficient, relatively low maintenance, and able to supply water to the lawn, trees, shrubs, and flowers. Labor and water saving features include automated control valves, timers, and moisture sensors. With proper maintenance, we expect the system to last approximately 30 years. We will also be connecting into the same raw water supply Boulder City uses to water the park across the street. And because Park Street is a no-cut street, the pavement patch is over 100 feet in length. So in the pop out of that exhibit gives you an idea of the patch that we'll be placing. Next slide, please. So the next series of slides will be talking about the existing accessible route and some of the options. So the accessible route shown in red requires a person to drive to the site, park in one of the accessible spaces, and then enter the rear of the building. And please note that the park side entrance, or the south of the building, has stairs and is not handicap accessible. And furthermore, the site access road is very steep and not an option for an on-site accessible route. And the sidewalk along Nevada Way ends at the site entrance road to the north and terminates at the sidewalk along at Park Street and Nevada Way. In other words, there currently is no sidewalk adjacent to the site from Park Street or Nevada Way. And so in summary, the site as it sits today does not provide an inclusive access to the public right-of-way. But it is compliant with the Architectural Barriers Act accessibility requirements because of its historic significance. Next slide, please. The project is considering an access route that will construct a new 5-foot sidewalk along Nevada Way from Park Street to Denver Street and construct a concrete ramp that switchbacks up to the lakeside entrance of the building. Next slide, please. This is what the proposed ramp that switchbacks up to the back of the building would look like. From a technical and user's perspective, this part of the accessible route is not ideal because, one, it would lead you across the service entrance to the back of the building and not to the park side entrance. And whether the building is historic or not, this kind of approach can be perceived as not being very considerate and inclusive, especially for a working government building. Next slide, please. An option that the design team favored but did not pursue, thinking it might be better to actually do this as a separate project at a later time, is to take the access route directly to the main entrance And from a technical design perspective, this option would provide the best and most inclusive, accessible access to the site. In other words, it gets people to the main entrance. And it also helps the public, or it helps keep the public out of the service entrance area and the employees' break area. It is more compliant with accessibility standards and objectives. It's also a shorter route. It's more shaded, would cost less, and in my opinion, would look nicer. And from a building security perspective, it might be a better option as well. Next slide, please. Another design decision that needs to be finalized is how to grade next to the new sidewalk along Nevada Way. We did, in fact, go that route. And here, option A, it has a 4-to-1 slope starting at the back of the 5-foot sidewalk. Option B has a 2% slope starting at the back of the 5-foot sidewalk for approximately 10 feet, then sloping up at 4-to-1. I personally prefer option B because I believe it is safer for those that will be mowing the lawn. It would be easier to keep the irrigation overspray off the sidewalk and help prevent slips, trips, and falls. And it would be easier to maintain the sidewalk, the irrigation system, the grass, and the trees because of the flatter slope. And it would be better for the tree roots. And it provides a more flexible space for pedestrians walking next to the narrow road. Now, another big consideration for doing this grading at this time is the economy of scale, in that we could do this grading while we're doing the project work as opposed to doing it at a later time. And of course, an option that is not shown would be the option to actually just do nothing and remove all of these accessibility improvements from this project and save them for another time. Next slide, please. So this brings us to the project schedule. First, there was a virtual public meeting that we held on November 17th, and notices were sent to all of us, our surrounding neighbors, to kind of inform them of the project and to request their input. And most of the comments were positive. There were a few objections to the use of turf grass and the proposed sidewalk along Nevada Way. The 100% design drawings, they were completed earlier this year in February. And currently our contracting folks are in the process of preparing the contract documents and looking for sources to do the work. And the last I heard, they were looking for qualified small businesses. And it's expected that the construction contract will be awarded by September of this year, and the construction notice to proceed would be given in January of 2022. And we estimate the construction to take up to 4 months or 120 days to complete. Next slide, please. So this concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions and accept any of your feedback. And you may also call or send me any of your questions and feedback. And I certainly would appreciate any feedback that you might have for me at this time to help us make this a successful project. Thank you. Next slide, please. That concludes the PowerPoint portion of the presentation.
Okay, are there any comments on this project?
You can't be,
Scott?
no, your mic wasn't.
Oh, okay.
You weren't close
I'm
enough.
sorry. Are there any comments on this project? Chad, I did thought I really liked the plant palette. I love that. It really helped to understand what you'll be doing there, and it looks beautiful. I think it's going to be a really nice addition to the city.
Well, thank you. We took a lot of time and effort and engaged the best professionals that we could find to help us develop that concept and being sensitive of the focal point that this is to the city.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much.
Hi, Chad. This is Blair. I had a couple questions. Did you send copies of this or get approval from the SHPO on your plans?
So that is, we're in the process of coordinating with SHPO on that, and it's kind of we've got two laws that we're balancing: the accessibility laws, but also the Section 106 historic preservation component. And the historic preservation aspect is weighing in more on this project and at this particular site. And of course, that's where your feedback from a historic committee's perspective is really important to us to be able to engage with SHPO and complete that consultation, especially in regards to the accessible route.
So then,
yeah.
sorry. So then you kind of led me into my next question, and I guess I'm confused about, maybe you can explain, when it comes to accessibility to a building, I'm used to making sure that accessibility is not just to the building, but from perhaps parking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering why the sidewalk is being added to the building starting at Park Street. Are you expecting people to park on Park Street, or is this like an alternative accessible route in addition to the red route in the back?
So this would be an additional route then. So the red route that's shown, that is that complies with the Architectural Barriers Act, and that is an accessible route. And for a historic building, you're allowed to have the access be where you can drive up, park in an accessible space, and then have a pathway to an entrance of the building. The yellow line is a secondary route. It's is more consistent with the principles of an intent of the accessibility, and especially with the universal design types of principles, where you're providing an access. So let's say, for example, there was an employee that was using a bus and using public transportation. This would provide them access to the building, where if somebody employee was using a bus without that access route to a public street, what we do now is we provide some reasonable accommodations. So the yellow route is just it's a better, more inclusive, accessible route. but because of the historic nature of this site, whether or not it's appropriate at this time with this project that was originally intended to reduce our water usage, and we're still trying to decide if we should pursue that accessible route to a public right-of-way.
So the public right-of-way at Nevada Way, that just is not technically feasible to incorporate that as an expanded route, I guess, to be?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, let's say an employee wanted, there were two employees and one was in a wheelchair and the other was just walking, they could use that route and they could go downtown, grab a sandwich and kind of go back up the hill. And they could, for the most part, share a common pathway back.
And then my final question is, the route in the back, the red route, I'll call it, is that equally accessible to the other building? I guess you call that the annex building, or?
Yes. So there's additional accessible parking spaces for the annex building. So similarly, you would use that access route that's represented by the thicker red line, but it would go over to the annex.
So, I'm sorry. So would the yellow route be also accessible to that annex building?
So yes, it would be. Yes, we would. You could make the. Yeah. There would be an extension. You'd be able to use that existing sidewalk that's around the main administration building, and there is an accessible pathway that could be made over to the annex building as well. But it's not shown on the drawing.
Okay, thanks.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
I'd just like to comment, it looks like you guys have done your homework on putting this whole proposal together. It looks pretty complete. I'm just gonna make a little comment on the accessible routes. I think it's a good idea to do something for, we're encouraging people to walk and navigate around the city and such, and that includes people that might be in a wheelchair, or motorized wheelchair, or mobility scooter, or what have you. Your ideal accessible route looks like it'd be a good plan for people who just want to get up and just get a little closer to the building, not necessarily if they have to go in, but it looks like once they got to that point, you could access the building. And if I'm not mistaken, from the one time I was up in your building, there's a straight hallway basically going from the front of the building to the back of the building right through there. So if you came up the yellow brick road, you go through the building and access the red access point for parking lot and going to the annex building. Am I incorrect in that, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you get to the front door, you easily get to the back door then?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
So like if you came in through if you use the red route and came in through what we call the lakeside entrance, it's a straight shot to what we call the parkside entrance on the south side of the building. There, either entrance that you take, the parkside or the lakeside, the hallway is, you can see right through the building at that point.
Okay, that's what I thought. I was just, sometimes I don't trust my memory, but but your ideal accessible route, that looks like it'd be a good way of going. I mean, it's just my opinion, and only my opinion. to encourage people to be able to get up there, even for people walking. Instead, that's a pretty serious flight of stairs to go up that hill, as compared to the alternate walk up a ramp sidewalk. I can see where a lot of people would rather walk the ramp than take on the stairs. So, I mean, and if you guys are into doing this project, do it all at one time, as compared to do everything you want to do and then come back and do something later and tear up half of what you already put in. So, but that's just my thoughts on that. I think the ideal accessible route that you've got listed, personally, I think that would be a better way to access the building for just people in general. And it looks like it wouldn't affect any of your staff and make it easy for any staff members that needed that access too. So thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to share some of our thinking and get some of your feedback. Yeah, we have put a lot of work into this. And, just kind of another idea that's kind of being kicked around, getting a little bit off script here, is the potential to, because of the historic nature of the building, and from my experience, we're now looking at, possibly separating and breaking some of the accessibility out into its own project, and engaging a different group of professionals that really have experience in the historic architectural arena, that could put together a more a design that incorporates the building themes and elevations in a way that this would complement that, and it would have the same type of design elements and the same type of texture and fabrics and things that existing structure has, so that it would stand out even less. So what that means is there could be the option of maybe we just do the sidewalk along Nevada Way up to Denver Street, and not do the part from Denver Street up to the entrance, but do that as a separate project where we engage then those historic architects. If that makes sense. And that's something I would certainly like to get your thoughts on.
Chad, I'd like to know if in your designs for the accessibility, if you've included any spaces for pickup and drop off for the handicap vehicles.
No, the yellow route does not. It connects to the public street, and you can take the street to a parking space, but no,
there's no designated spot for these vehicles to pick up and drop off people with disabilities?
No. No, they could, like a vehicle could use the red route, and they could take the entrance road up, and they could park in, the accessibility parking spaces at the admin building or at the annex building. That's the only option that they have now.
So Chad, this is Blair again. I like your idea of perhaps stepping back and having somebody, a designer, architect with the knowledge and experience to do a comprehensive accessibility plan for the site, like you're thinking about, which would include not just the administration building, but the annex building, but also I wonder if they could include or look at, you mentioned if people are walking or biking or on a bus, is Nevada Way on the bus system, or, where would this fit in within our transportation system, I guess, within this part of the town. As well as, getting feedback from architects who have
Yeah.
good background, in historic preservation and, utilizing the historic character or the features of the site, not just the buildings, but the site. Because I was kind of curious if it seems like a really long way to go up Nevada Way and cut over and I don't know what the elevation or grade is, but, to the right of Park Street, going up to the other side, the south side of the building,
Yeah.
if that's an option, and that might, I don't know, maybe somebody could come up with some kind of a zigzag, really cool route up that bank. Because I see that there's parking, like right next to the building to the right of the admin building. Anyway, I think there's a lot of potential options and to consider, and unless you've already, gone through the process of determining what you can and can't do based on a bunch of different factors. But if you have an option to work with somebody who's really good at this, I guess I would suggest that route.
Yeah, I think because of the significance of this building, I think that's the prudent approach to take. But as far as trying to coming back to the economy of scale, maybe maybe the sidewalk along Nevada Way, like we do want to plant the plants and the trees and get those going. We probably should have planted some of the trees along Nevada Way about 20 years ago, but let's say we did the grading along Nevada Way and just put the sidewalk up to Denver, maybe with this project. Maybe that's as far as we take it, and then do the rest along Denver Street and the entrances and the other options and make that a separate project and engage historic architects.
And I guess I would ask the city, like, what are their plans for sidewalks along Nevada Way? Does it matter that you have only one sidewalk on one side and only partially on the other, or it's hard to see from the picture if there's a sidewalk. There's a sidewalk to the north of Nevada Way, but is there one to the south? I don't know.
Yeah. There is a sidewalk on the west side of Nevada Way. So if somebody was at the intersection of Denver Street and Nevada Way, they could walk west, cross Nevada Way, and get to the sidewalk and then head south. But that's not really accessible. They'd actually have to go in and probably do some major modifications to make that accessible, to make that like an accessible crosswalk. So yeah, I would agree that I think it would be worthwhile to engage the city and talk in more detail about some of these larger accessibility issues.
I agree. Thank you. You guys have done a lot of really good work.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments before we close this off? Thank you, Chad, for your time and your effort, and I know that we will all look forward to this project and seeing it materialize. Thank you for your time.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chad. We're going to disconnect now.
Okay. Bye.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on for possible action, review and recommendation on an RDA Historic Preservation Grant application for 524 Nevada Way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As noted, the new owner of this vacant retail location is Grant Turner, and he's applied for an RDA Historic Preservation Grant to rehab this building. The property was most recently occupied by Back in Time, a retail establishment, and Mr. Turner is seeking RDA funding through the HPG program in order to make various improvements to the building to return the building to use as a tavern, as apparently it was once a tavern in the past. And so the staff report goes over the various categories of the changes that are proposed, and then those are all detailed in the eligibility form for the grant that you have attached in your packet. With regard to historic guidelines, technically, as what are considered non-contributing elements are proposed per the adopted guidelines, it doesn't require formal review by the committee from that aspect. However, the grant application requires review and a recommendation by the committee. Although the guidelines, aren't required to be reviewed by the committee, all the usual information related to that is attached in the packet just for your consideration.
Right. The only question I had reading this, I see where we've totaled up $63,132 so far from the grant, but I didn't see, I might have missed it, where he was asking for a certain amount. It was just, did he ask for a certain amount from us?
I believe it's a match.
It's a match? Okay, somehow I missed that. Could you show me?
Well, the parameters of the grant are that it's a grant in which up to 50% of the total project costs of eligible improvements can be reimbursed.
Okay.
So he'll
it's
probably
reimbursed.
be asking for the full 50%, and then it'll be up to the city council to determine, as with all grant applications, what gets approved.
Okay, all right, thank you. That wasn't communicated to me. All right, thank you so much.
If you're ready, I'll give Mr. Turner a call.
Please.
This is Grant.
Hi, Grant, we've got you on with the committee.
Hi, howdy.
Great. We'll just let the committee ask any questions of you.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments concerning 524 Nevada Way?
I've just got a bit of a question. I'm sorry, Jude.
Go ahead, go ahead. Glenn.
I'm all for businesses and stuff like that to apply for the RDA funds and for the uses that, are proper with the RDA. My only question is, on looking at this, I noticed there's, relocating the door, it's just, I thought that, with the Historic Preservation Committee, we were supposed to be looking at things with major changes that are visible from the street. And this appears to be pretty visible from the street, relocating the door and changing the windows around. I'm sure it probably falls into how you want to design the interior of the building, which is, that's wonderful and stuff, but that's my only concern is about changing the whole face of the building. I know you're going to leave the walkway the same and repair that and make that look pretty good and everything, which is, is wonderful. But again, I'm just concerned about the relocation of the door. It changes the whole aspect. I mean, if you look at the pictures that are from the 82 survey of Rosie's Cantina and stuff, I mean, and then you look at your proposed thing with the door on the right, little tucked away alcove, I'm just kind of questioning that a little bit. If that shouldn't have come to this prior to everything else. So that's more of a comment than a question.
Okay.
Well, and let me follow up, that was one of my questions too, and why, I don't understand why we wouldn't be looking at this project and making a recommendation based on the guidelines.
Based on the guidelines, the only items that have to come to the committee for review for commercial remodels are just 4 items. 4 items are considered non-contributing elements, and only those trigger review by the committee per the guidelines. And the 4 elements are: 1, providing a mansard roof; 2, providing parking between the structure and the street; 3, new or perpetuation of existing exposed roof-mounted equipment and exposed conduits, ducts, or pipes on the roofs or walls; and 4, perpetuation of abandoned signs. And so the information is in the report that obviously the first 2 criteria don't apply at all. And then the report contains information from the architect describing how the roof-mounted equipment is going to be pushed back and screened, and that there are no abandoned signs that will be perpetuated because they're going to modify the existing pole sign out front that has the bike on it. So technically, that's why this wouldn't have had to come to you other than the grant application. But we provided all the background for information anyway.
Thank you.
Susan, can I get a clarification in that paragraph guidelines? You know, it says, you know, you got number 1, any plans for new building, this doesn't count. But then number 2, any addition visible to the public right-of-way. This would be, this addition looks like it'd be visible from the right-of-way. They're adding an alcove to the front of the building, and
Well, from a code standpoint, this is a remodel, but it is not an addition. They are not adding square footage to the building. They are not adding a second story. They are not adding any extensions. So, no, this is...
okay, so the addition is just if they're adding square footage.
Correct. Okay. That's what a building addition is adding to the building.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted clarification.
Sure.
Okay.
Hello, Grant. It's Ray Turner, your cousin. I just want to compliment you on another venture that you're undertaking. I'm really happy to see another historic building being remodeled and rejuvenated and prepared to continue its lifespan for who knows how much longer. But it's very nice that you're doing this. I really appreciate it, and I wanted to let you know that I support you. I was concerned about the door also. I'm curious to know the reasoning for moving it, if you don't mind.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. Are you asking the reason for relocating the front door?
Yes, just out of curiosity.
Relocating the front door accomplishes 2 things for us. Logistically, one of the main challenges we face is providing ADA access to the rear of the building. As it stands right now, there's an 18-inch, there's 3 steps. There's an 18-inch elevation change about halfway through the building. So currently the backside of the building has no ADA access, which is where the bathrooms will be. Relocating the door helps us accomplish that. We ramp in, and the second thing it accomplishes is because the space is so long and narrow, in order to have a live music venue and provide a stage, we had to squeeze the door to the right side so that the left side can be occupied by the stage.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks very much, Grant.
Yeah,
and,
had it not been for that, I mean, aesthetically, I think the door in the middle looks just fine, but we are doing everything in our power to maintain the historic integrity of the site. to the point where we've reached out to the museum, we've reached out to Dennis McBride, Alan Goya, we're working with Alan Stromberg, you know, all the heavy hitters. We're really going out of our way to preserve the history, and even to the point that we were able to salvage the first bar ever in Boulder City, the Stagecoach, the original bar, and we're having it expertly refurbished and reinstalling it.
That all sounds wonderful, Grant. I wish you all the best with that.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing it.
You're welcome.
Hey, Grant, this is Blair.
Hi, Blair.
I'm excited to see what you're going to make of this. I did have a few questions, if not suggestions. And this is perhaps has to do with the RDA eligibility. For instance, you're putting in 3 bathrooms, but it currently has 2. Does the RDA cover the adding in, I guess, of a 3rd bathroom?
It currently has 0 ADA bathrooms, and there's on the bottom floor there's no ADA bathroom at all. So we're putting in 2 ADA bathrooms downstairs, and then the second floor would also, because that space will be assembly space, it requires an ADA bathroom as well. So those are a function of meeting code requirements.
Okay. And then I'm just going through the list, the application, and so when you get to concrete, it looks as if you're doing concrete work, but you're actually not doing any concrete preservation. So, again, this
Correct.
is a question for the RDA.
The concrete
grant.
work we're doing is sloping and ramping for ADA access.
Okay, so that goes with the ADA category and not with concrete preservation.
Correct.
Okay. And then, let's see, sorry. The doors and windows, we've talked about the moving of the door. I was a little concerned with at least the images I see where you're going to cover the windows, the 2 windows that are viewed from the street or the right-of-way, with a smooth contrasting panels and then a signage on top. So there's going to be no glazing on the exterior of that building?
We're working with Alan Stromberg on that, and part of the we wanted to really make sure we're doing as much to keep it period correct as possible. And one of the struggles has been getting photographs of the building in its original state. So we don't know yet over the years how it's been changed or how it looked originally. I'm waiting on some information back from the museum of, I believe her name is Tiani. I've not met her in person, but I feel like we've got the very best opportunity to work with the team that we've assembled. I feel like we've got the very best opportunity to accomplish what we need to accomplish logistically and keep it as true to historic as possible, to the point where maybe it's even there are elements that have been changed that we're going to be able to bring back to their original state.
So in the course of demolition and work on the building, if you find that there are windows that used to be glazed, you plan to at least, I guess, honor that rather than cover them up? What I'm getting at is if you decide you need to cover the windows, instead of doing it on the outside, I would suggest doing it on the inside. So.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that's an idea that was brought up in one of our design meetings, and that's certainly under consideration. As a matter of fact, possibly the leading contender. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you dig into these buildings, you find you get treats. You find surprises and really cool architectural elements. On this one, unfortunately, man, this thing had it was essentially just a block structure with plaster, and unfortunately, a lot of the plaster had been covered by siding, so there was glue all over it. It had been drilled into. Parts of it had been chiseled away. I think the only thing we found that was even remotely interesting is, I think it says laundromat, right, on the back of the building. So the original rear of the structure has some signage that was buried. It would have only been visible from the alley, I believe, and it says laundromat, which is pretty cool. So we'll definitely be preserving that.
Very cool. And then I had a question. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, unfortunately, whoever has worked on this thing in the past, if there were any really cool historic elements, they didn't survive any number of the remodels that have taken place prior to us getting in there. So unfortunately, it's a blank canvas.
Got it. So about the roof and the treatment of the parapet, I understand you want to raise it by about a foot, but I don't know if you noticed that there's some green. I'm not sure if it's green trim or is it a rain gutter, but at least from the pictures that you've provided historically-ish, it was an open eave with exposed rafters. Do you plan to, I guess, repair the front facade, the roof parapet kind of area to what it historically was?
I'm sorry. Was that a question?
Yes. So there is I think it's a gutter that's in the front. Are you going to remove that? Because it's covering the exposed rafters that I think perhaps are still there.
So are you referring to the gutter that exists currently?
Based on the pictures I'm looking at.
That it runs down the face of the building, down one of the columns on the left side of the arch, is that?
And in the front of the building. Under the eave. So basically the gutter that's right under the roof eave, I believe, is covering the exposed rafters.
It's a little pop out. Little wood. I think they're still there. You know, let me. I know if what you're referring to. Let me pull. You're talking about pictures of it is pictures in its current state, not any of the when it was rosies or anything like that, right?
Correct.
Oh, okay. So I think what we're talking about is
That's the picture Alan submitted.
Yeah, we just need a current picture. Pardon me one second. If it's what I'm thinking of, it looks like just a modern, relatively modern gutter that they put in. Oh yeah, yeah, that was done. That gutter is not there in the yeah, and it's under the tile, so that's not even functional. It's not. It's. Are you asking us to remove it?
Yes.
Yeah, we can certainly remove that. Yep, yeah, it's not pretty. Let's say that's going away.
Perfect.
Yep, absolutely.
That's all my questions and comments. Thank you. Good luck.
Hey, thank you very much.
Grant, I've been in that back in time building shopping. It's kind of small. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what you do with it. So good luck.
Thank you very much. And that was the entire reason for buying the building and creating a tavern is because of its shape. We've always referred to that as I've had the dream for just years and years to create a skinny bar. There's something about a long, narrow tavern. It forces, it by its nature, I think, kind of makes it a little bit, intimate, a little bit exclusive. And I think it's going to be a great venue for live music as well. We're really excited to be bringing in some talent. So, and because it's so skinny, every inch matters. So we are taking great care on the design. in other sites where the die wall for the bar could be a 2x6 wall, we don't have that luxury here. So it's going to be like maybe, 1 inch by 2 inch metal tubing. So things like that where it's going to be a design challenge. It's probably going to be more expensive. But every single inch matters. So we're really looking forward to the challenge.
Good. Okay. Any other questions before we close this off? All right. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. We'll disconnect now.
Okay, Susan, take care. Thank you.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. For possible action, follow-up discussion on historic water filtration plant improvements for CCCHP grant application.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Regarding the last item, the committee should technically make a recommendation on the
Oh.
grant application.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, do we need a motion for that?
That'd be best.
Okay, all right. I need a motion for the grant application for 524 Nevada Way.
Move to approve grant application for 524 Nevada Way.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
If there are comments or suggestions made to this application, are those included?
What we typically do is the minutes for this meeting are included as part of the recommendation that goes to the city council. So they can see the committee's discussion and comments and suggestions.
Okay. All right. So all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any negative? The motion is carried and passed. Okay, now we're moving on to the historic water filtration plant improvements for CCCHP grant application.
Thank you, Chair Graham. At the last meeting on January 27th, the committee had directed staff to evaluate the feasibility of conducting a historic structures report. And the committee had also provided specific recommendations for improvements to the historic filtration plant. Public Works staff has evaluated these requests and has provided some handouts, and I'll turn it over to our Public Works Director, Keegan Littrell, to provide an overview of the handouts that you've received at the dais this evening.
Hi everyone, Keegan Littrell, Public Works Director. As Mr. Mays just said, there's two handouts in front of you. One's just a simple spreadsheet, and then the other one is a draft scope and fee from Northwind. As it states in the staff report, we did reach out to Alan Stromberg. Unfortunately, this wasn't in his wheelhouse. He said he'd love to be able to do it for us, but he didn't feel like he was fully qualified. He said the only person he could think of was a gentleman in California, but he was pretty sure he had been retired. So our city engineer, Jim Keene, reached out to LGA to see if they had any recommendations, and they actually recommended I believe it's Miss Mooney. Yes, Miss Mooney with Northwind. So Jim and myself had a conversation with Miss Mooney and her staff and gave them a broad overview of what we've been discussing with the council and what you guys have been discussing here at the committee. So they just put together, this is kind of an a la carte menu to choose from. Seeing how we don't know for sure direction on what we want to do with the water filtration plant, Ms. Mooney thought it would be good just to include anything she can think of so you have more options to choose from. This is more, Mr. Mays had said you guys were looking for more of a light version. This is what she included as more of the full-blown version of the historic report. But she also understands that we can pare it down and reduce costs any way we want. If you flip to the fourth page, it starts at the bottom of the third page. the different tasks that they have. Task 1 is just coordination with, they've got LGA and Mel Green and Associates as sub-consultants to work with them on their team. So that would be coordination with meeting with staff, and if we come back to the committee, and the sub-consultants. And then task 2, doing the research and document study. They were planning on utilizing the report that was done in, I believe, back in 2006, and then also with the facility study that was done in 2019 as a place to start. And then also doing an existing condition study as task 3. And then also going down to the historic structure report, putting that together and submitting that for review. In talking with Mr. Mays earlier, we felt it would be best to hold off on submitting to the National Registry. That can be always accomplished further on down the road. We're more focused on getting this report and helping us get an idea of which direction we want to go with the filtration plant. And then you see on page, I guess it would be page 5, they've got a breakdown of their pricing for some of the different options. North Winds, most of the $12,500 that's in there is for the second task. They understand that they can pare that down. But the bulk of the pricing comes from LGA's architecture for their estimate, which includes the architectural, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, fire protection, environmental, and then putting together a cost estimate. And I understand that's quite a few of the tasks that you guys were looking for. And then also what Mr. Green was going to do, basically doing a structural assessment of it. Between LGA and his firm, they have some 3D equipment that they can be non-invasive to check how structurally sound the building is. And then if you want to look at the spreadsheet that we put together, we took your guys' bullet list from the last meeting, and then in using some of our professional knowledge and past studies, past projects, put together a very rough estimate on what those items would cost, and then also a 10% contingency at the bottom.
So the overall cost then is very similar to what you projected to begin with then? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any comments at this time? I know we didn't have a chance to look at this real carefully beforehand, so.
Yeah, nope, completely
Yeah.
understand. It was last minute, that's why it wasn't in the packet.
Yeah,
They actually
that's
put it
okay.
together really quickly for us. Just unfortunately, it was too late to get it included.
Okay.
Chair Graham, if I could just add some additional context. So the impetus of this was the council is seeking additional guidance from the committee regarding what should be included in the CIP project for filtration plant restoration. With the material that's presented to you tonight, I think there's a couple options. You could provide direction that the cost estimates based on the improvements that were outlined by the committee in January could be your recommendation to the city council, and then staff would incorporate those improvements into the CIP proposal that's being considered by the city council, which ultimately will be a part of the budget that would be approved by the city council in May. You could instead say we want to hold off on these recommendations and recommend that the city move forward with the study. And staff, of course, would try to move this forward as expeditiously as possible. It would require approval from the council for a budget amendment because this has not been budgeted in this fiscal year. We would try to get it done in time to make it into the CIP proposal and considerations for the council by May, but there's no guarantee. Or your recommendation could be to provide the preliminary guidance on the cost estimates and also recommend that the city pursue the proposal for the historic structures report concurrently so that we can move forward concurrently with a cost estimate preliminarily with the CIP budget and also getting their recommendations after their assessment and bring that back to the committee. So those are three potential choices for the committee to provide direction to staff.
Okay. Does anybody have any
Yeah,
thoughts
so,
at first here? Go ahead, Blair.
I guess my suggestion is to propose the whole kit and caboodle, which I guess is $481,591 if you include Northwind's estimate. And I was wondering if you could do that based on the fact that because potentially the historic preservation grant won't all come back in one lump, but maybe split up by because of their standards. So would the city be able to, I guess if you ask for $500K, and can you put in, I guess, clarification that that $500K is not going to be spent this fiscal year, but will be half this fiscal year, half the following year, perhaps. And it won't be half and half, and that's because the grant from the SHPO might be split in two.
Just to clarify, when you say this fiscal year and next, what you're referring to actually is fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, and so that we have, with the budgetary process and the CIP, proposing that the improvements would occur over 2 fiscal years, reflect that accordingly within the CIP, and then subsequently submit the grant application to reflect that as well.
Unless when you submit the grant, because the way I looked at the grant application or guidance, it was one was for planning and the other was for actual work. So does SHPO automatically figure that out, or do we just submit it 1 year for the planning and then 1 year for the actual work?
I see what you're saying. So then we would be seeking grant funds to pay for the study in the first year and seeking grant funds to pay for the improvements in the second year.
That's one way to do it, unless you were thinking that the city would pay for the planning part and then the second, or simultaneously, or within the same fiscal year, whatever that is, that is where the grant kicks in. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, and that will be up to the council to decide if they want to approve funding for this year. And also the timeline for getting the work done. It's going to be very tight. So if the committee is comfortable with the preliminary cost estimates for the improvements, and this is inclusive of the areas of focus for the filtration plant restoration, that gives us guidance to proceed with the CIP. And then if you are also recommending that we proceed with the historic structures report, we can take that to the council and we can say, here are the committee's recommendations, that we proceed with the study and that we preliminarily budget for these improvements, and see how the council wants to decide, is that all going to be tied into the grant and then budgeted in the fiscal year, or do they want to do a budget amendment to proceed with the report within this fiscal year?
Got it. Makes sense.
So, you're familiar with working with the council. Do you think this is rushing it, or what would you recommend?
Well, I think that the study will be very helpful ultimately with the grant application. And I think it demonstrates to SHPO that we're taking a thoughtful process through this assessment. Having your recommendations on improvements too shows that these are the types of things that we're contemplating. And I think to Member Davenport's suggestion, over a multiple year process, it may be a more palatable grant to SHPO because of that approach.
Okay. Okay, any other comments from the committee?
I just got a couple of little tiny questions, just clarification stuff, just because I don't know. I'm just curious on, like for building security, you're talking $25,000. What all does that kind of include? I'm just kind of, I mean, it's kind of a lot for a lock on the door.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's something else included, but any idea of kind of what all it includes? Just
Yeah,
same-
it
same
can
with the
be
pest-
a multitude of things. We could go anywhere from a $50 new lock and door handle. 25,000 is a very rough number, throwing it out. If we want to put access control, like we have for getting into the building here, if we want to have any sort of security cameras on the building, inside or outside, so it can be ranging.
Okay, so that includes kind of a major wish list of anything you might possibly want for security of the building.
Yep.
And I would assume kind of the same way with the pest management?
Yep. Yeah.
So-
Yeah, we have a pest management program in our building maintenance division. They just kind of go to areas that are already known or that are pointed out to us. So we could invest some money in there and make sure everything's cleaned up. And the pest management would also include cleaning up any waste that might be in there.
Okay, I was just curious on that. I mean, most of the stuff is pretty much self-explanatory. I
Yep.
mean, lighting is, you need good lighting to, if you're gonna have the public in there, et cetera, and, bathrooms and such, so.
Yep.
But those are just kind of, it's $40,000 for, kicking the rats out and keeping the hoodlums out.
Yeah.
Just kind of, what all's encompassed in all that.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, it's a very rough estimate. It was, anytime us engineers are asked to put together something, it's usually on the high end, because we'd rather come back and tell you we saved money and instead of coming back and asking for more. So, yeah, this is hopefully everything's on the high end, and not all this money would be needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I might add that building security, would that include, you think, fire detection and notification?
Yeah, that can usually be linked in with the security system. And some of that might come from the sprinkler system too. That might be wired all together. So those might be kind of double dipping.
Okay, and then for pest management, it's not just, hopefully that's not just cleaning up, but having a plan in place for keeping pests out.
Yep.
And that might include installing pigeon,
Yeah.
preventers and things like that, or?
Yep.
Okay. No, I think the estimate looks fine to me, without any great detail. Did you add, I guess, this was my question, do you have sometimes they add a percentage to cover historic preservation needs? So, for instance, lighting, or not lighting, but let's say brick tuck pointing, it won't be just going to Home Depot to get your mortar and slapping it on, but you would have to match the mortar and, go through that process. So there's sometimes a 4% or 5% addition to your standard industry estimate.
Yeah, we were doing some research on that, and when I say we, it was mainly the city engineer, Mr. Keene. So he was looking that up and trying to figure out where a price point would be on that, because we don't have that much knowledge in it. And $25 a square foot was the high end that we were seeing. They said there's mechanical ways to do it, can bring it all the way down to $5 a foot, but with the nature and the age of the building, we figured it'd be a lot safer to go on the high end and doing it by hand.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The improvement items that you have listed, it does include everything that we talked about.
Yes.
So
Yeah, we pulled
it's a
that.
pretty extensive. list.
Yeah, we pulled that from, Mr. Mays gave us
Right.
that from the last meeting.
Exactly, okay. Okay, so it looks like we might want to do this in a 2-year plan, is that correct?
I think we should just be flexible depending on the grant process. I guess if we could do it all at once, that'd be awesome, but if
Yeah.
we can't, that's okay, you know?
Yeah, and I think really what we're looking for from direction from the committee is responding to the council's question. And that is, what improvements do you want to see with the building? And then certainly we'll work with the council as part of the budgetary process and ultimately the grant application process to submit for what's going to be most advantageous to the community for receiving those grants, whether it's all at once or it's over a 2-year process. But I think the key thing that we're looking for feedback from the community tonight is, the improvements, if this is reflective of the improvements that you're looking at, and your recommendation on the historic structures report, that we should proceed with that.
Okay, do you need a motion of us or just guidance?
I think a motion would be helpful.
Okay, all right. Can I have a motion on this project?
I'm waiting to second Blair's
I move to
motion.
approve of the list of improvements to the building, restoration work, and can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion?
Excuse me,
Yes.
is there a recommendation about whether or not the city should pursue a budget amendment? Sorry, should the city pursue a budget amendment for the historic structures report? Is that part of the recommendation?
Susan, just to clarify, I think not that we're pursuing a budget amendment, but you're recommending that we proceed with the report. And then we'll work with the council on how the council wants to handle that.
Okay, so is the motion okay then that we made? Is that proper?
Well, he just mentioned to approve the list of improvements.
Okay,
And a recommendation on the report.
Yes, and a recommendation on the report as well, to go ahead with that report.
Can I redo, or?
Revise it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make a motion to, no, I'm lost. I make a motion to approve the list of improvement items and the cost, as well as Northwind's report and their cost, and moving forward with however the city can help pay for and move this project forward. Is that right?
Okay, we need a second then?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, then we'll take a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any negative? Okay, the motion is passed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keegan.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to make one comment too. I know we've already made the motion and everything, but before we go on, I did want to thank Brock Armentrout for his excellent report on the water filtration plant, and that did give an extensive background on the building. And most of the committee here has been, we've been walking through this process together, but there are some new committee members, and I did appreciate that, and it was very well done. Okay.
Can I follow up?
Yeah.
So regarding Northwind's report, we're going to move it forward with what they've recommended, but that still can be negotiated? Or do you think the city council would want to know what could be cut? Or, for instance, he mentioned the National Register nomination, maybe we cut that out. So are we still going to go to Northwind to maybe tighten this up? Or will we wait on the city council to determine if they will agree to this as is?
I think that part of the reason we had suggested, streamlining this was in part to shorten the time frame for the report to be timely with moving forward with the CIP project. With the committee's recommendation to proceed with both, that's giving clear guidance to the council that you see the value in the study as well as your list of recommended improvements for the water filtration plant. So I think that's sufficient guidance to proceed.
Because I was thinking we could cut back on the price a little bit if we were to ask Brock to update his 2005 or whatever study. But
I could certainly inquire with Northwind whether that would be helpful in reducing the cost.
if it isn't, then no biggie.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, very good. All right, then, no other comments, then we'll move on. For possible action, update on implementation of the committee's goals and priorities.
Thank you, Chair Graham. So this is the monthly update on the goals. You will see in bold the highlighted changes from last month. The one thing I did want to highlight, and thank you, Member Davenport, for your comments on the draft historic preservation plan. And just as a reminder to the rest of the committee, if you have comments, if you could please get those to staff as soon as possible. We're going to provide those to the Nevada Preservation Foundation so that we can bring back the revised draft plan to the committee in March. So as soon as possible, you can get us those comments. And I can answer any questions on any of the other updates.
Well, we're making tremendous progress on this. I can remember when we first started, and we're just doing quite well. Thank you for all your hard work.
I have a question. Sorry I didn't read this, but is the ad hoc committee somehow referenced in here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. That's under item 4. And so it just mentions the meeting that occurred Monday night.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, second one planned for February 22nd. Okay, very good. Any other comments? All right, moving on. For possible action, update on implementation of the committee's goals and priorities. Okay.
No, you're on item 6.
Right, I thought so. Okay, thank you. For possible action, update for the Historic Preservation Ad Hoc Committee. Okay, now you're on, Blair.
Sorry, I didn't prepare very well for this. So our meeting was this past Monday. It was a productive meeting in that we were working with the city attorney, who looked at 4 different versions of ordinances that we were looking at for using as our model for Boulder City. I believe we have decided to use the Nevada SHPO model with the Historic Preservation Officer as a component of that ordinance. And our next step is for the ad hoc committee to look at that model ordinance and add anything that we think is necessary or needed. Specifically, we thought it'd be good to look at the 2000 city ordinance. There was a lot of good information in there, so maybe there's some information there that can kind of go into this Nevada SHPO model. I guess the thing to do would be maybe perhaps at our next meeting we should provide a copy of the Nevada SHPO model. I don't know if we've
Okay.
as a committee, this committee, if we've had a look at it, and maybe at our next meeting, we can kind of go through it, and it'll help to have the city attorney's kind of chart where she compared and contrasted the 4 different models to explain what's in the ordinance. So,
All right.
so that's where we're moving forward on, and I thought it was positive as far as we're moving forward. And Ray, can you add anything, or?
Well, it's moving along really smoothly. We all are in agreement, it seems, on the SHPO model. And I think that's something that the public, too, are likely to get behind as well, knowing that it's the model code for the state. And we're going to make those comparisons between the 2000 code and the model SHPO code and hammer out a final draft of that. So
Okay.
yeah, it's looking really good.
So then, will you call the city and ask them to provide that for us in the next agenda then?
I think we could say that on our next agenda item, or the last agenda item is when we talk about next agenda.
Okay,
Are
all right.
you, I assume do you want that to be attached to the ad hoc committee update item? Or are you wanting a separate agenda item for the whole committee to discuss the Nevada SHPO model?
I don't know if we need to discuss it. I think it's more of a presentation.
Then, in that case, I'll just make a note here that you want that added to the packet with your report, your update from the ad hoc committee.
There you go, along with the attorneys, city
Right.
attorneys.
Yeah, I'll get that from Michael.
Okay, yep.
Okay,
Perfect.
good.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Glad everything's going well and things are smooth, so that's very good. All right. Then we'll move on then. For possible action, discussion regarding activities for the Historic Preservation Event and Award for 2021.
Okay, give me one moment here. I'll just give a brief summary of items in the staff report. For the utility mailer, member Davenport had provided suggestions for the flyer, and so we basically used that version, and it's attached. It will be mailed out for the first batch starting next Monday. And thanks to Communications Manager Lisa LaPlante, in addition to the utility mailer, the same information is being added to County Commissioner Jim Gibson's newsletter. So
That's
that
great.
goes out to a bunch of people via email. Member Davenport also submitted proposed changes to the nomination form information for the website, and staff just had a couple of comments, which the committee just can take or not. One is that the new nomination form does not provide an option for people to nominate a building just because they think it's been well preserved. The only options on the draft form are just basically for rehab or new construction. And secondly, there's a statement on the instructions, that asks whether or not the form is 100% complete. And some people may be intimidated by that because they may think that if they're nominating somebody else's property and they don't know who the owner is and their contact information, the implication is that the application would be rejected if it's not 100% complete because somebody didn't have that information. And then lastly, one of the statements on the form mentions for photographs interior views. And even though elsewhere it references that, only exterior views of the property will be considered, the reference to interior views might be considered confusing to some people. With regard to the website, that's going to take a bit more time to format, so some of these changes might have to be made, after this process, in terms of reorganizing a whole bunch of items on there. But we will do what we can, because the key thing, of course, is having the voting option available by next week, once the mailers go out. The only other comment I have to make is that we do not have a lot, very many IT professionals on staff, like almost none. And so, as it turns out, from what Lisa told me, is that making these interactive forms on a website is incredibly complicated. You're having to write computer code and script for every single item, and it was not something she had expertise in, so she actually spent over 20 hours working on the version that Member Davenport prepared, because I understand while it's pretty easy to do in Word and type up a document with bullet points and boxes and check marks, it is not an easy thing to do on a website. So the only thing I'm mentioning is that given that we have to have this live by Monday, we're just asking that you not recommend any major or wholesale changes to the forms, just because it takes too much work to do. It's basically, she already has done the work related to what Blair had proposed, but it's easier to take things off of that than it is to add more new things or change the format, et cetera. So for instance, if you just wanted to delete the statement asking, if the form is 100% complete, that's an easy thing to take off. But adding more check boxes or filled in boxes, we just may not be able to accommodate in time for it going live next week.
Okay. Now, is this the one that's going to go in the utility mailer, Susan? This one?
What page are you
It's
on?
on page,
Yeah,
it's in green.
The first graphic after the staff report.
With the picture of the last year's award.
Yes.
That's the one that's going to be in the utility.
That's the one that's going out in the mailer,
Okay.
yes. That'll be on the back side of the utility mailer
Okay.
sheet.
All right. That turned out really nicely. Did you work on that, Blair? This one?
It looks a lot like last year, so it's just cutting and pasting.
All right. Yeah, that's really nice. Okay. Well, I'll look forward to seeing it there.
So I have a question. So was she trying to make the award nomination form to be filled in directly online and not just downloaded?
That's how it is done, and that's how it's always been done. People.
The award nomination?
You nominate live, you nominate online. You don't download it and fill it in and mail it in. It's a live, I'm sure
So
you.
this is like, so she basically is doing something like it was last year, but.
Yeah, well,
okay.
and that's why we've got last year's version as a reference in there as well. And you could see that it's much, it was much shorter.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that
And I
she was
understand.
going that direction.
I
or-
wouldn't have realized it was that much work and that much difficult to do either, but I don't have to write code for websites. Let's see.
So she's going to go ahead and try and make this live online.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, on page 148 of the packet is our, the nomination form from last year.
right.
Right, so you can see basically it, obviously the website page had the details of the information, but when you click here to nominate, it just asked for the name and contact information of the nominator, and then, of course, the address that they were nominating and any photos, that could be uploaded if they had them. And obviously, your form has a lot more in terms of project completion date and project participants and all the contact information for the property owner, which many people will not know.
See, I thought this was just a piece of paper that people
Of course.
downloaded.
Of course, I understand, but no, I'm assuming well, I don't know if members actually nominated. You probably, as committee members, you shouldn't be nominating properties, so you wouldn't have been through that process. But no, it's a live, you do it online.
Okay.
You're filling out a SurveyMonkey survey.
Yep.
Now, of course, if people don't wish to do it online, they can always contact us. And, what people did before, some of them, is they just, when they got the flyer in the mail, if they didn't want to go online, they just mailed us a note with photos saying.
Yeah.
And we got that last year, a couple of them by mail.
Got it.
Can we put that in there?
Put what?
We can do that. We put some reference that they can online.
Oh, I believe it's,
But they can
Well,
also do it by mail if we put some kind
yeah,
of
the,
reference.
the version we used last year mentioned that it could be done online. Well, last year we said in person or by mail, and this year, like for instance, on the flyer we did for this year, we just mentioned online or by mail. I mean, because at this point with COVID, we don't know back and forth whether City Hall is going to be open or not. So it already states in the flyer they could do it by mail.
Oh, okay, very good. Well, we thank you for your diligence to get this done on time, you know, for the utility mailer and everything. We appreciate it.
Well, I guess what we need to know, though, is what version of the nomination form do you want to go forward with? I mean, do you want to just do the simple version we did last year? Or are you wanting, remember Davenport's version where it doesn't have an option for people to nominate a property that's just been well-maintained? And it implies that a form has to be 100% complete in order for it to be accepted. And it's got all that information asking for people to submit information about the property owner, which if they're not the owner, they might not know.
So
Okay.
for the third bullet, the photograph, you're correct. It shouldn't be interior pictures. The reason I went, I'm sorry?
What page are we on? 150?
143.
143, okay, okay.
So these were the three problems that
Oh,
Susan mentioned.
Yeah,
And so people shouldn't be submitting interior pictures for their nomination. That's the third bullet.
okay, I see now, okay.
As far as the first bullet, what I guess I could do is, I could say preservation, rehabilitation, or adaptive reuse of historic residential property. If you look at my form on 150, and that preservation is a form of maintenance. But what I was trying to get away from, and what we had talked about with other, at other historic preservation meetings, was getting away from the beauty contest concept of an award. Just because a building is really cute and pretty doesn't necessarily mean that's historic preservation. We were looking to see and try and grab information and input from the public as far as, you know, active historic preservation work, historic preservation and maintenance,
Right.
as rehabilitation and restoration and all that. So.
well, I guess the thought I considered for that, because I thought that might be what you had in mind, is just that only a property owner who's nominating their own property will be able to tell you what they've done to maintain the property or preserve things, or, you know, how sensitively they did a remodel or an addition. But any citizen nominating somebody else's property, unless they happen to know the property owner personally, they won't know. They won't know if the owner has actively done things to, you know, maintain something. And in fact, and this is one of those little dangers of historic preservation, because the professionals will advise that, for instance, if it is an addition, that you not make it look just like the original house, you know, so that it can be easily distinguished from the original construction. But there are people in town who have done that sort of thing. A casual observer saying, oh, that home looks great, and it looks like they did a great job with historic preservation. They won't know, you know, what has been preserved versus what has already been remodeled. So I'm not sure there's an easy way to avoid the beauty contest issue. If you want to leave it an option for people simply to nominate buildings in their mind that they think represent a good example of historic preservation, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to nominate them. The committee can always consider
Yeah, I
all the
think they should be
factors.
able to, because then the committee would be more discriminating.
You're gonna have the knowledge and expertise, and of course, once the nominations come in, you know, if you want, you know, depending on the timing, you know, if you want more information from the homeowner about, what they did or didn't do, if they didn't provide much information, we can always reach out to them so that they can provide that to you. But, actually, let me look to see, because now I think there was a calendar.
I was gonna
The staff report.
I thought it was going right along with Susan, that let people nominate things they might not know anything, and then it'd be up to this committee to kind of, let's say we get 20 nominees. I think it'd be up to us to just quickly go through the 20 nominees, like this one really, no, it's not gonna make it, this one not gonna make it, to get, weeded down to 4 or 5 that really, yeah, these look like they're pretty original or have been restored properly. And then we could, go from there to find out additional information, contact the homeowners of that property or something like that. I think if you want, just my thought, if you want the general public to participate,
Yeah,
keep it simple, keep it easy, and then, let them submit whoever kind of they want, whether it be a beauty contest or not to them. Then it leaves it to us to weed those numbers, weed those beauty contest people out and just go to the historic preservation. But this way, people will feel like they're part of it.
yeah, definitely.
They go down the street, they say, boy, that house on Cherry really looks nice, and it's just, and to them it looks absolutely wonderful. But, it might be the house that was blown up by a tornado and rebuilt in the way they wanted to, That person might not know it where we might, because we'd have the documentation available to us. But that person felt good about at least nominating that house. They're part of the community then. So I would think just keep it simple. We might get a whole bunch in, but that might not be a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree with Glenn. I think
just-
people need to have the opportunity to participate, whether they realize the technical part or not.
Yeah, because we can go through 20, 30 pictures real quick and say, I'm sure
Yeah.
Blair's got enough
We can
knowledge right there. She'd go, yep,
discriminating.
yep. No. In 5 minutes, she could probably go through 20 pictures and say, this is not going to make it, or this one will. But I think that would be on us to do that, because we're going to ultimately we pick the winner ultimately. But let's have the community feel that they're part of it.
Yeah, I agree with Glenn.
Just my thought.
Yeah, you bring up some really good points, all of you. So then, are you suggesting that we use the simple form that was used last year?
Yes.
And,
just real basic.
okay, and then, because the onus of choosing and evaluating is on us, can we continue to use the criteria that's on page 149?
Sure.
And,
Well, yeah, we can establish how we want to judge them, by whatever. I mean,
but
this
the
gives people.
the public needs to see this too, so they know what their nomination is being evaluated on. So I don't know where that fits in with
Well,
the online.
basically what you have to keep in mind, and I don't know if all members had a chance to really look at all the information in the report, is because, of course, there will be basically on the website, there's going to be a narrative page, just like there has been in the other years. And so, for instance, in the packet on page 147 is the example of the narrative page from last year. And so, Blair, what you did on your first sheet on page
149.
on 149 is your example of the narrative page.
Okay.
So there's still going to be a narrative page, and then somewhere on that page, like the one on 147, it's going to say, click here to make your nomination.
Got it. Okay.
So it sounds like the committee is okay with using the simple online nomination form that has been used in the prior years. And frankly, that'll be a lot easier for staff to implement. But to possibly on the narrative page on the website, add more of the items that Blair had on page 149. And I guess And to be honest, it's late now in this process, so we'll try to accommodate what we can in terms of comparing the two and trying to get what we can in there. So going over Blair's criteria on page 149, do you still want the narrative page to, under the very first item for award criteria, to have the question, is the nomination form 100% complete? I mean, for one thing, it's going to be the shorter form on page 148, and, I mean, it's going to have the nominator's contact information, you know, and of course, the address that they're nominating.
It'll by default, because it's such a simple form, be complete.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I don't think it's necessary to state that. It just might put some people off.
Well, the award criteria, I think that's good for us to know, but I don't think a lot of people can answer those questions.
I think they should.
But I don't think they can.
Yeah.
People don't, I mean, someday with work, there may be more, but generally a lot of people they're not gonna
Right.
know. It's on us to make the decision.
Well, except there is a link to the Secretary of Interior standards, so people, if they want, can look to that. And the words sensitively preserved, rehabilitated, and restored, those are common, you know, categories or conditions of a building. Which part do you think they won't get?
The award criteria paragraph at the bottom.
Right, all of those? They don't understand 100% complete, or the property is historically significant?
Well, I think they understand the question, I just don't think they can fill it out.
They're not filling out anything.
I mean, I don't think they can answer that.
Some
Even
they
in their
don't
own
have
mind.
enough knowledge.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think under the paragraphs under applicable projects, I think that's wonderful. But the award criteria, I mean, I just don't, they're not gonna know the answers to some of those questions.
Maybe they don't need to know, but don't you think they need to see that, to be transparent, that this is how we are going to be reviewing their,
I agree.
They're not
I don't think
answering-
these should,
they're not
I don't think
answering
anything
this.
should be left out, but, you know, if they're not able to fill out the form 100% or they make mistakes or whatever, I don't think we should hold it against them, but that we certainly should include the criteria so that they can at least see what it is they're trying to accomplish and make the effort.
Well, it's just, some of the award criteria just for the general public, shall I say, I think is a little ambiguous in that, all right, just like, is a building or property historically significant? You know, that's a pretty open-ended question to a lot of people. I mean, you know, to some people, I'm just gonna pick on a building I'm familiar with, the old American Legion building. It doesn't fall into the historical part of Boulder. It's in the district, but it's not a historical building.
I
You know, it
think-
was built after 45.
I think
But a
one,
lot of people think that that is a historically significant building. That's what I'm saying. It's just kind of, you know, we can figure that out, but for just, you know, John Q. Public walking down the street, looking at the buildings, you know, all over downtown, you know, and, oh, hey, I got this thing in a flyer. I'm going to nominate this building for something, you know, for this award. You know, do they know what is historically significant
The
in
ordinary
town?
person knows.
I think I have a solution to this
Okay.
problem. I think, and it relates to how people will perceive this and what they will be confused by. Blair's point is that this information on page 149 isn't information that the nominator has to fill out. The
Correct.
nominator doesn't have to.
Exactly, that's what
They
I'm-
don't have to do it, but I think the public will be confused because if they're reading it in this format, they might think that they have to have that information in order to be able to nominate a property. And so if the intent is to have everybody feel welcome to nominate whatever they like, one option to deal with this is what I could do is revamp that section, and instead of listing it as a bunch of questions, which people might think that they have to answer on the form, I will just briefly summarize that and say, the committee will consider the following criteria,
Yeah.
when
Right.
selecting the winner of the award, such as the historic significance of the property, whether or not it's been sensitively preserved or rehabilitated, according to the SOI standards, et cetera. So I can work with that, but,
That's a good solution.
okay, because
Yeah.
I'll do the
Good.
best I can, but like I said, it's going live by Monday, so.
Yeah, no, that sounds
The
good.
worst case scenario is that it's gonna look like last year, and hopefully that will be okay. But the good news for you this year, of course, is that you will have more tools at your disposal with ammunition, because now you're gonna have the Northwind updated survey included for every one of the nominations. So that will help you a great deal, because as you saw from Northwind's report last year, 2 of the winners of previous awards are
Didn't
actually
even-
considered,
Yeah, qualified.
not contributing to the historic
Yeah.
context of the district. And of course, you didn't know that
No,
at the
we didn't.
time.
Yeah.
You didn't have any more, much more information than the public does, but this time you will have more information.
Yeah.
And when people nominate, make nominations, and they don't make it, and they're given an example of why, but by referencing the Northwind, it'll encourage people. They'll be able to see what it is that they failed on, and maybe
Yeah.
they might want to consider making some changes for next time.
Yeah. Okay, are you happy with that, Blair, with the compromise? Okay, good. All right. Okay, then we're gonna move on then. For possible action, discussion, update on the status of properties in the historic district. Any comments? Okay,
Wait, I have a question. What's the Hotel Plaza sign?
I think that was just for that title insurance company. It's just they got a new sign,
Oh,
so it's just we're reporting the permits that are approved, and the guidelines just say unique signs, so any sign technically meets that criteria. I mean, that's why we know that the committee is going to want to further revise the guidelines down the road to be more, provide more detail.
so it's not a big monster neon sign that's 10?
Pardon me?
It's not a 10-foot tall neon sign?
No, it's a normal building sign, just like, the previous building signs have been on there. I think that building's just, if I'm thinking of the right one, I think it's just the one that's always been, from one title insurance company to another. So they're usually pretty safe,
Cut and
simple
dried.
signs, across the top of the building.
okay. All right. For possible action, committee discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings. And I think we went over that already. Okay,
Do we have anything to do in March for the award or Historic Preservation Day, or is that just a standing?
No, well, technically, for the award, we'll update you on, if we've received any nominations by that point, but the policy has always been that we give you all of the nominations together at once at the April meeting when you make a decision, so that you're not, not inadvertently creating any inward biases in favor of early ones versus later ones or something like that. So we'll just report on how many nominations we've received, but certainly at that meeting, the committee members, if you want, can, just flesh out if you've got any more ideas for the video presentation, or if you wanted additional videos, or for items after the May event, you can fold that into your discussion next month if you like. So yes, it will be on the agenda.
Okay, including, and also Historic Preservation Month events.
Right. This time we went over the forms.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I mean, and then you can still talk about your HP month events tonight if you want. I just didn't, I didn't ask if you didn't bring up anything, but
Yeah,
that's
I don't
certainly
have
part of
anything
the
to add.
item.
Yeah, I think we've got the pressing issue covered now, because that was pressing as far
Right.
as the deadline.
Right.
Okay, so then we'll discuss it some more then next month. Okay, then we're going to open up again to public comment. And okay. All right, so to comment during the public comment, any public comment then from the public, they can call in.
You want to announce the phone number?
Right, okay.
You have to say the number.
Oh, do I? Okay, I'm sorry.
You should, in case somebody's
Okay,
just listening.
Yeah. All right. To comment during the meeting, members of the public may call 702-589-9629 when the public comment period is opened, and it is now open. Okay, hearing no public comment, then we will adjourn this meeting for all practical purposes. The meeting is adjourned.